You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody. Returning to Katahdin, an Appalachian Trail dream. Have you ever dreamt of hiking the AT? Bruce Matson did, so we're going to follow him every step of the way. Hi, and thanks for coming back to join us again on Returning to Katahdin, an Appalachian Trail dream, sponsored by Trailtopia Adventure Foods. I've been looking forward to this week's conversation ever since I first spoke with Bruce about doing the show. When we last spoke, he was about to hit Mount Musa Lackey, the first mountain in the Whites that really knocked my socks off. Going above tree line that day was the thrill of a lifetime. I've often gone back to the recording I made at the top of Musa Lackey that day, and I can hear the excitement in my voice. It was a truly epic experience, and I hope the same for Bruce. Even speaking about it now makes me excited at the prospect of doing it again next year. It's funny, my recollections of that time are so deeply etched in my mind, and I often revisit that day in my head. I wonder if Bruce had the same impression. But before we get to Bruce, it is time for a spot of brekkie. When I was hiking, I'd wake up to my alarm, deflate my airpad, and contemplate my blah breakfast. Every morning I poured water into those different coloured paper bags, scrunched around the ingredients, not one of which had any association with fruit, and then eat that soulless gunk. I then find unhydrated powder and sugar in the crevices of the bag. Trailtopia's blueberry oatmeal is a bit of a novelty because it actually has real blueberries. Who'd have thunk? No gunk. It tastes great. The bag design ensures complete hydration, and it really sets you up for the day. Try Trailtopia Adventure Food, the best of home cooking away from home. So now, with his first impressions of the White Mountains and much, much more, here's Bruce. Right, we're on with Bruce again. Hi Bruce, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good.
And you are where?
I'm in Gorham, New Hampshire.
Wow.
Gorham, New Hampshire.
Well, I said we haven't spoken now because I went away, didn't I? So we haven't spoken for a little while, probably over a week now.
It's a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as it turns out, I couldn't speak until today anyway. The reception in the Whites has not been very good. I haven't been able to talk to Cheryl very often.
Right.
And so this was probably the first day we were going to get a chance to talk anyway.
Okay, well, I want to talk about, obviously, the week because you've been over some spectacular mountains. But first of all, I've got a question, and it's from David Braxton. And David says, Bruce has talked in the past about hiking in snow and a little about rain and how it makes hiking over rocks more dangerous. I was wondering if he's had to deal much with thunderstorms and how he's dealt with them. Thunderstorms happen to be my top fear and loathing subject, having been through a couple of close calls myself while tenting. So have you actually been camping in the middle of thunderstorms?
I've had very little thunderstorms on this trip.
Wow.
Probably 3 times I have been out in thunderstorms or tenting during thunderstorms.
Right.
And one of my good friends asked me the same question the other day, and I don't mean to be too cavalier about it, but I just keep hiking on. If the thunderstorm was particularly close and I was out in the open, which is as you know not that common, but if you were out in the open, like on a bald in the south or in the Whites, then obviously I would think very carefully about getting below tree line as soon as possible. But I don't have a phobia about thunderstorms, and maybe I am a little cavalier about them not being that dangerous, at least out here. But I also haven't been faced with a more imminent type situation. When I've been out in thunder and lightning, it's been a little more distant. I mean, I certainly see it and hear it, and I'm in the rain, but it's very seldom. The only time I can remember probably twice having some thunder that was very close was where we were already tenting for the night.
All right. I see. Well, I remember waking up in the middle of the night at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I could hear there was a rumble of thunder in the distance About 10 minutes later, it was right over my head. I mean, right over my head. And the noise was horrendous. And of course, the worry is it's going to strike a tree, knock it down, and right on your tent. So that's what certainly gave me some concerns. And having the tent light up in flashes of light every now and then is quite. I found it quite daunting. So you've been fortunate that it hasn't been too bad. Have you actually been through many thunderstorms while you've been inside shelters?
No, of course, I've only been in 2 shelters the whole trip.
Oh, wow. How about that? Crikey. And why was that? Because it was raining so much?
Well, one time in the Smokies because you're required.
Of course, yes.
And the only other time was I would have tented that night too, but when we got to the site, there was only 3 of us there. One guy was hammocking. I knew the other guy, and it was late enough that I thought we were just going to be the 2 of us in the shelter.
Sure.
And the forecast was, 100% chance of showers that night, and it was nice to be in. But I generally did avoid the shelters because I don't like the crowding, I don't like the mice, and so I had very seldom stayed in shelters.
Yeah, I like the thing of being in a tent is you definitely feel very self-sufficient out there when you're in a tent, don't you?
Yeah, I have loved my. It's silly that we said this before to get any sense of protection or comfort in this little still nylon environment, but I actually do, and I do like my little privacy for the evening. So it's been good. Last night we had a horrendous no thunder and lightning, but a horrendous rain last night.
Right.
And this morning, and but my tent came through again. I stayed dry and comfortable, cool. And obviously had to pack up a horrible wet mess, but it got me through the night.
Nice. Well, look, as I said, you've really moved on this week, and the last time we spoke, you were about to hit Musa Lackey, which really is the start of the whites. Start in New Hampshire. So. What was that like? Because I did say to you, I said, you're going to be so excited when you go above tree line. It's amazing up there, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So, you hear about this, as you're planning, you certainly have mentioned it many times. You talk to people along the trail, and It's always the whites and the whites and the whites. So, and Musa Lackey, it's kind of infamous of being the first, and it's got that horrendous descent on the north side. So, I got myself, just mentally prepared. I went and camped at the base of Musa Lackey, just got as close as I could to the mountain. Had some amazing trail magic unexpectedly that night, and then got up the next morning and just said, I can do this, and got up to the summit. It wasn't a terribly difficult. It was a hard climb, but we've had harder climbs. Unfortunately, it was clouded in at the summit,
shame.
even though it was predicted to be a good day.
Right.
But it seemed like it might break. So I took about an hour and a half lunch and just hung out there with some other people, and the clouds were coming and going. So I did get some really good views and some good pictures as we'd get these 15 or 20 minutes of clearing, and then the clouds would come back in. So it was quite nice, and it was fun to know that you had tackled that first big mountain. But coming down was the part that I was sort of the most concerned about. And again, we talked about this a little bit more and more all the time. And again, I think my mental approach made all the difference, because I was expecting just the most horrendous, difficult mile and a half of the whole trip. And it was very steep and very difficult, but it's a little bit like I've mentioned coming out of the NOC. It's known to be a horrible slog, a long climb, and it is now part of my trip experience. I had a very interesting, fun day that day. And believe it or not, coming down Musa Lackey, even though it was very steep for a mile and a half and it's famous, I actually enjoyed it because I was so prepared for the worst, and I took it on, and I was ready to take as long as it took, and I was going to be careful. And there's this beautiful waterfall, almost this flume that follows this trail almost the whole way.
It's magnificent, isn't it?
Yeah, and then a friend of mine showed up unexpectedly, and we kind of did it together. And when it was over, I chalked it up as pretty enjoyable experience and a great accomplishment. And so I do think, the mental preparation for that severe condition made a difference and turned my potentially really tough day into a pretty enjoyable one.
Right. Well, actually, as I think I mentioned the other day, I went up the other way, so I went up that tough downhill, and I remember going down where you went up, on the way back, I was then going southbound, obviously, when I went in reverse. I remember thinking, it's long, but it isn't desperately steep, is it, as a climb?
That's right. It's long, but a very fair climb.
Yeah.
We definitely climb more difficult things than Musa Lackey.
Yeah. Well, tell us about the trail magic at the bottom. What happened there?
Well, that was a lot of fun. I came rolling in after about a 14-mile day. It was a good day. I wasn't, I was tired as I always am, but there was only one person there, and he was sitting, this section hiker, and but there was a father and daughter sitting there, and the father said, "Hey, would you like a drink? I've got some Cokes and some beer." Huh. And I looked at him like, "Yeah, you're pulling my leg, right?" And I said, "Do you really have a beer?" And he said, "Sure." And he pulled, and I noticed then that the section hiker sitting there in the shelter had a beer in his hand. So he had nice cold Cokes and beers, and then he opened up a briefcase and he had 20 bacon double cheeseburgers and chocolate eclairs and chocolate milk and watermelon, and there's only two of us there to eat it all. So you can imagine I didn't have dinner that night from my Trailtopia, but we had it was great trail magic. Be able to have a beer and have a burger at the end of the day is pretty fun.
Funnily enough, I actually heard you mentioned the other day, in fact last night, in a vlog, where somebody said that RTK said, I heard RTK the other day saying on a podcast there were no mosquitoes, and he thinks the heat may have died him off. He said, well, he must have been lucky because we're getting covered in them out here. So maybe you just had that lucky week, Bruce.
Look, I'm the most blessed person in the world, and so I understand that. And I've said this enough now. I kept it a secret for some silly reason, but I'm almost into Maine, and I still have yet to use insect repellent.
I know, amazing, absolutely amazing. Don't know how you do. Have you seen any moose yet, by the way?
No. I don't think we're really going to see any moose till Maine.
To Maine itself, okay. Now, let's go forward. You did Musa Lackey, and then you did the Kinsmans. I think it's the Kinsmans after Musa Lackey, isn't it?
Kinsmans are next.
Yeah, and then the presidential. So tell us about some of those.
Yeah, very, very brutal, very bad conditions, bad weather. Not bad weather in terms of wet rocks, thankfully, but it's rained a fair bit, so trail was watery, muddy, very slow going, and no real views.
Oh, dear.
And then after that, I guess I had the most magnificent day to go over Franconia Ridge.
Oh, did you?
It's one of the most iconic places on the trail.
Yeah.
And I was so fortunate. I climbed up a little haystack, and then I had seen many, most people who follow hiking all have heard of Franconia Ridge, and It's often listed as one of the nicest places in the world, actually, for hiking.
Yeah.
And I didn't appreciate how long it was, and I had such a lovely day and kind of go down and roll through that, and that was I was just blessed to have such great weather and great views.
And the ridge is pretty much all above tree line, isn't it?
Oh, it's all above tree line.
It's awesome, isn't it?
It was I think it was a Sunday. I can't remember now, but it's a very busy place. No, Musa Lackey was a weekend, and there was a ton of day hikers.
I'm sure.
But anyway, a lot of hikers up there. Ran into some friends up there. Can't remember where I ended up. Oh, I think I ended up at Garfield.
I know.
And Mount Garfield was kind of almost like my Mount Buchanan experience in New York. I did not see Garfield coming, even though I could look at the profile. But I just right at the end of the day, Garfield was very steep.
It is incredibly steep, yeah.
Very steep down.
Yeah.
And unlike the next day you do South Twin, and it was a bit like climbing Musa Lackey. It was a long climb and up, but there was enough reasonable places to step and some homemade staircases. But Garfield was just a jumble of angular rocks with no logic as to how to get up. So you're constantly these odd steps and these uncomfortable steps and pulling yourself up. And again, at the end of the day, it was exhausting. And then I came down, partway down Garfield, and then camped at Garfield Ridge. And then when you leave Garfield Ridge campground, it's not only continues to be incredibly steep, but the first 0.2 miles is a stream running right down the trail. So that was pretty hairy.
Yeah, I think when you come across some of these tough downs, particularly at the end of the day, it does talk to planning where you are going to end your day, doesn't it? Because you can really give yourself if you give yourself a hard downhill right at the end of the day, it is exhausting. I remember we climbed down from Mount Madison, and that was just endless, and we were just exhausted when we got to camp. All right. Yeah, that's
yesterday
tough, isn't it?
And that was one of the hardest things on the whole trail so far. I couldn't agree more. It was brutal, and it was starting to rain. Actually fell a couple of times, but fortunately not bad falls, but irritating falls. And as I mentioned to you before we got started the recording, my knees are hurting more than they ever have. I've been surprised. I think I've said to you on this podcast, I've been surprised my knees and ankles have done so well.
Yeah.
But I will say that all of these steep declines over the last 4 or 5 days have got me a lot of pain in my right knee and a little bit in my left knee.
It's accumulative as well, isn't it? It's not, it doesn't go away, but when you start going downhill going downhill from Madison just went on and on and on. I remember my knees at the end of it were a nightmare.
It was brutal. That was yesterday, and I was at the Osgood tenting area.
Yeah, that's all right.
And it poured. But what we missed, just for the listeners, what we did miss was after Franconia, I got to do the climb, Webster Cliffs, Mitzvah, all the way to Lake of the Clouds.
Yes.
Which all in the morning was clouded in. But after I left Mitzvah, I had a wonderful day from Mitzvah all the way to Lake of the Clouds. I got to do work for stay at Lake of the Clouds. And then 2 mornings ago, I climbed at Washington.
Yes.
And it was clouded in, but clouds cleared by the time I got there. They say that there's 300 days a year where the summit is clouded over, but it was pretty nice when I was up there. So I was really fortunate again to have another good hiking day over Washington and then down through the northern presidentials and finishing up with Madison. By the time I got to Madison Hut, it was still a nice day, but going over Madison and down Madison, we got a light rain that turned into a horrendous rain last night and this morning. So that's kind of what I've done so far, which is, of course, most of the whites are done now.
That's right. It's just amazing that you're now about 1,800 miles now, or is it 1,900 miles? I can't remember.
It's like I think 1860 something.
Amazing, great. Well, actually, I was going to come back to the Washington just now, but you've just said it anyway. How did you find that going up Washington? I personally didn't find it that difficult.
No. What you find is, and when you're in the whites, you run into a lot of weekend and day hikers, and I think they've done a lot more. The grades they've picked. What they've done is they've picked the most reasonable grades they can, I think, for the most biggest population of hikers. And then they have all the spur trails to go to the summits.
Sure.
Now, of course, everyone wants to go to Washington, but I thought the trail up to Washington was, nothing's easy, but if anything's easy in the white, that's an easy hike because not only was the grade reasonable, but they've done so much work on the trail that it's not a staircase, but they clearly are moving rocks around and making the pathway easier than my best example of the contrary is Mount Garfield. So, I think climbing up to Washington, it's only 1.4 miles from Lake of the Clouds. I left at 7 o'clock. I was up there at 8:15. I was the first one there. And
was the shop open? Was the shop open at the top?
They really nice people up there. They said, they're not really open, but I think coffee's made, and if you want a muffin and a cup of coffee, I'm sure they'll sell one to you. And they did. And they didn't open until 9, but they took care of me just fine. They were very hospitable up there.
Right. So, and we talked last time, you hadn't quite worked out what you were going to do with the hut system. Did you embrace it? Did you do some work for stay? And for those, by the way,
Yeah,
just for people who don't know, work for stay is basically literally that. You go into a place and they'll sometimes let you stay the night. And if you do washing up for them or just sweeping up, they don't give you hard work to do, but they just want you to do something and they'll let you stay on their floor. Did you do any of that?
I did. So I stopped at almost all the huts, usually for a break, maybe a snack, or just to check them out. I didn't want to spend a lot of time going very far off trail to any of them. But I wanted, to see what the hut experience was like. So I actually paid for one night at Zealand Falls, which was really, really nice.
Right.
Nice experience. And then I did get work for stay at Lake of the Clouds. So I was able to see the experience from a paying customer and the experience as a thru hiker. And the people at Lake of the Clouds were great. Like you said, I washed dishes for an hour and a half, and that's all I had to do. And Cheryl was like, "Well, you have to sleep on the floor." I said, "Well, yeah, but think." And then before she said any more, she realized, "Oh, but you sleep on the ground every night, so the floor's probably pretty good."
Yeah, it was like luxury. You're inside. You're inside.
You're inside, right? So you got a bathroom down the hall. You got water. It was actually quite nice, and it was easy to be able to get up in the morning and no packing up to do, not a lot of packing up to do, and get going. So I think I could have stayed and had breakfast leftovers, but I wouldn't have been eating until 9 o'clock, and I just wanted to get going. So
yeah, I know what you mean. So you've done pretty well through the Whites in terms of the miles you've done each day, haven't you? Because I remember we took 11 hours to do 11 miles. We averaged 11 miles a day.
I think we're still only averaging, a mile an hour, maybe a little bit more.
Right.
No, I wouldn't say I had a 14-mile day, but no, I wouldn't say, I'm much closer to a mile an hour.
Yeah, you can't.
They're hard. They're tough.
Yeah, you can't sprint through them. There's no doubt about it. You can't. And then, of course, after that, you had, I believe, and maybe I'm wrong here, the Wildcats. Did you go to the Wildcat Mountains?
That's tomorrow.
All right. Okay. You really had a journey this last couple of weeks. So, what's your overall reflection on these? These, as you say, iconic mountains, and particularly Franconia Ridge, but that whole area you've been in so far. Have you enjoyed it so far?
Yeah, I have. So I just finished. If some people probably visit my website, and I do a weekly blog post, and it's usually a week or so behind. And I just about finished that up, and I never know what I'm going to say. I try to make it a thematic. In the early days, it was a little boring, just people, place, and thing. But little by little, I've tried to make it a little more thematic. Like
Sure.
When I went through Shenandoah, I titled the blog post "Oh Shenandoah" because I had just a fun experience there. Yeah. And because I said "Oh Shenandoah" when I went through Vermont, I repeated that sort of "Oh Vermont" because I thought Vermont was so beautiful. Right. So I was kind of finishing up, and I'll probably finish it tonight. This blog post, and it just like these things dawn on you. I said, this is a beast of a area to climb through, but it has this remarkable beauty. So it's kind of a little Beauty and the Beast theme, and I still think that's probably a good way to think about the Whites. Is very hard hiking, even though they're popular trails and they've done a lot to make the trails at reasonable grade and as few as rocks as possible. They're still incredible climbs, incredible rock problems, incredible descents, and it's really hard. And I hear Southern Maine's even harder. So
Southern Maine's real tough. Yeah.
But you said so. But I said to a few of my friends, I said, if I was making a deal with the devil, I would just like 2 good days in the Whites. Just give me 2 days to enjoy the awesome scenery. You can't expect to have every day when you're out here, but I'd like to have a couple days. And I think I got 2 or 3 very good days to have enjoyed them. So I'm pleased to have done that. And I think, having spent the time walking on these ridge lines and looking out 360 degrees at this magnificent White Mountains, it lives up to the billing that you and others have made. So I like the Beauty and the Beast theme to the Whites. I think if I went back, I might do a little more pay for stay hut hopping than
Yes.
carrying it 35 pounds.
And are your spirits staying up? Are you back in? You're really back into it now, and you've got your spirits back? Because I can't believe that. While I know that's tough, it's also to my mind, my favourite part of the trip was New Hampshire and Maine. So, is it keeping your spirits up as well? The fact that it's a challenge and an enjoyable one.
It is. It still makes a challenge. I've been out here a long time, so I'm managing it sort of daily. But having gotten through the whites with some really good experiences.
Yeah.
Is definitely helpful. So I'm not in getting ready to head into Maine. I'm in a better place than I might have been a week or two ago.
That's good. That's good. Good to know. Well, I think you've been through one of the great parts of the world that I can imagine going through, and to do it from a height is just awesome. So I'm glad you had a good time with it as well. Shame about the weather, but these things happen. You might have a beautiful Maine. You never know.
Yeah, I can't complain. It was reasonably good. I got some good views, and all in all, very fair opportunity to enjoy.
Very cool. All right, mate. Well, look, thanks for talking again. It's been the conversation I was looking forward to most of all, because I know how excited I get the thought of going back to those mountains next year myself. So the fact that you've just done them or you're still in them is just great.
Yeah, they did not disappoint, and I know they're a key place for you, and they didn't disappoint despite a lot of expectations.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, we'll catch up again soon, and keep on. About 300 miles to go. Just amazing.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, but we're just going to keep pushing towards the finish line.
Yeah. Okay, mate. I'll speak to you soon then, all right?
All right. You take care.
Cheers then. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
I tell you what, he is lucky that he hasn't had much trouble with thunderstorms. There were a few times when I was out there that the lightning was ripping through the trees. And as you'd imagine, it's only going to take one tree on your tent to ruin your hike in a very terminal way. That was an excellent question, David. Please make sure that you send me your address for your 2 Trailtopia meals to steve@hikingradionetwork.com, which of course is the address for any of you who want to speak to me. It was interesting to me that we had similar experiences on some of these mountains. Washington was always a bit of a worrying target, but in reality, once I got there, it was no sweat really to get up there. Our weather cleared on the way up, so we too had some great views. But those climb downs, as Bruce said, can be utterly brutal. The stresses on your knees are substantial, especially on those endless climbs down. They just seem to go on forever. But he's nearly through the whites and ready for Maine. He's resting on the Sunday this week to give his knees some time to recover. By the time he listens to this program, though, he's going to be back at it and subjecting himself again to everything that New Hampshire has to offer. I got to tell you, I'm kind of jealous. Bruce and I will see you next week.